Anybody here who's programmed in C# before? You're at the right talk. Well done. Anybody here from a background in C++? You're still in the right talk. Anybody here used APL? Nobody? We get one or two occasionally. A programming language from the 60s. Okay, well, I think I'll get started. So, I'm Sean's dad, well, that's what I'm known these days. I'm also known as Phil, and I'm based in the UK. I work as a developer for an asset management company based in Copenhagen. Actually, my background is in video games, so you'll be seeing some of that over the course of this talk, as well as some enterprise bits as well. In my spare time, I help run the Functional Londoners group in London. We have over 950 members. We meet every 2 weeks. To put that in context, I think the .NET user groups kind of caught us up recently, but they meet every couple of months. So yeah, there's a lot of interest in F# in the UK. Worldwide, the red dots on this chart are F# user groups, dedicated F# user groups. The blue ones are user groups with lots of F# content. We've got very recently a group starting up in Thailand. So our F# tourism is looking a lot better now. But we've also had groups over the past few months open up in Madrid and Barcelona. It's if you want to look at a community that you can travel to nice places, we're pretty good for that. And I think why have I put community up here? When you're getting into a language, you're not just getting into the syntax of the language or the others. Well, you are getting to the syntax, but what you're also getting into is the community that goes around it. And if you get into the F# community, you're getting into a community you'll know about building big systems, a community knowing about games, machine learning, data science. And if that's the kind of thing you're working on, we'll be able to help you. We have people who know how that works. So you might find that helpful. Okay, so this is possibly the most boring logo in the history of mankind, and this is the official visual F# logo. It's very similar to the C# and VB ones. This is actually the official logo from the F# team. The F in F# stands for fun, and actually fun is a keyword in F#, and most people who do F# have a lot of fun with it. So let's try and get rid of that boring idea. The first project I worked on with F# was Halo 3. I was working at Microsoft Research, and we needed to do the matchmaking for Halo, and we wanted people to have a good experience. They didn't want them to get pawned all the time, so we wanted to match them against fairly even players. To do that, we ran all of the Halo 2 outcomes for 2 weeks over lots of different parameters using F#, and came up with what we thought were very good parameters. And actually, pretty much when you played Halo 3, one of the biggest games at the time, you had a 50-50 chance of winning or losing, which was nice. Actually, the interesting thing with this one is we actually had a really nice algorithm for matching, but because it was so good at finding your skill level, people didn't quite like to know that they're bad that early. So they want to feel like they're progressing. So we had to slow down the algorithm to make you feel like you were achieving things. So that was that work. Another project I was involved in after that is the Chinese board game Go, and this is available on Xbox Live. I've put this up immediately because this is C# for F#. The AI for the game was written in F#, and a lot of the plumbing was done in C#. And I think this is for me, a really good place. Not thinking of F# as a replacement. This is a language that sits side by side as a friend with C# and can be used for things where it makes sense, and C# still has its place for doing things as well. So what is F#? So this isn't an official book cover, but I guess this is probably what I'd like it to look like. F# statically typed. I'm going to do a lot of live coding later, and you're probably going to think this looks like dynamic, like JavaScript. It's statically typed. We've got the same performance as C#, possibly better, and actually better type checking, but without having to write huge, massive declarations for everything. It's functional first. So the defaults are safe and they're functional, but it's not a pure functional language, and actually it's got great object-oriented features too. And in fact, for object-oriented work, I prefer using F# over C#. I'll show you why. It's open source. It's a .NET language, also runs on Mono, Linux, Mac, Raspberry Pi, and it's first class. You just, when you install Xamarin Studio on Mac and Linux, or you install Visual Studio, it's there, waiting to go. Okay. More unicorns. C# and F#. Again, best friends, not competing. Okay? So, this testimonial is taken from fsharp.org/testimonials, and you can see down the bottom, there's a load of testimonials from people who have adopted F# and are very excited about it. They've got a huge business win, and they want to talk about it. So in this example, we've got a company from San Francisco who do data science called Kaggle, with a large existing code base in C#. They've moved to F#, and they found, because that was easy, because their code's already in C#, it's already in .NET, the interop's just there, it just works. The F# code is shorter, easier to read, easier to refactor, and contains far fewer bugs. Who wouldn't want that? That's just great, right? And they've become more productive. And that's the typical story. But just before I go into the coding bits, I'm going to take you through for a few more examples. So this is another book cover, which never made it out of my prototype phase. I just want to explore, before I show you code, high level, why you might want to adopt F#. And we've looked at lots of companies and the reasoning behind why they made that transition to F#. And these are the four big kind of factors. So time to market for your business, is getting software to the customer timely important to you? If it is, you might want to consider F#. Is efficiency important to you? Again, F#. Correctness. Are you working on financial software? Are you working on planes? Does it matter that you get rounding errors, or you put two numbers the wrong place, or it all gets a bit dynamic? If it does matter to you, correctness, F#'s a great place. And complexity, and I think this is probably the big one. If you're trying to build a CRUD app, take your pick. I mean, realistically, you're not really doing code as such, you're just sort of wiring a database to some screens. But if we're actually dealing with complexity and computation, then F# may be a good fit for you. So, let's just take a few examples. European Investment Bank, these banking people, they don't like to tell you who they are if they're having an advantage. So they've got 50% speed development. I'd take that. And then we've got a quote from Yang Kui, who was doing a talk here yesterday. Order of magnitude increase in productivity. I would definitely take that. Right? Who wouldn't? Efficiency. So process that used to take hours, take minutes. Performance is 10 times better than the C++ that it replaces. I definitely take that. 10 times faster than C++. And that's not a small company, that's Aviva. Okay. Correctness. Virtually bug-free code. When I hit F5 when I'm running a C# project, I don't know about you, I have like this kind of feeling that I might hit an exception. When I'm running F# code, pretty confident after I've gone through all the pain of making it compile that it's just going to work. That's a good feeling. This quote is from a team working at Eon. They replaced the C# system. I think the code was about 8 times shorter. It actually worked where the previous C# implementation had failed. And this is 3 years on, they are still waiting for their first bug to come in. This is being used to balance the power grid in the UK. That's not something that's kind of common. It's something common in F#, but not so common in software development. Okay. So I'm going to dive a little bit into correctness. Could anybody fill in this blank for me? Null reference. So, $1 billion mistake. I think $1 billion is actually a little bit of an underestimate of the cost. If you look at your bug database, how many of those bugs are null reference exceptions? And those will be live on client sites. So, the databases I've looked at, it's around 50%. So half of your bugs are null refs. That's solved. So it's a solved problem in F#. Okay, complexity. I love this one. Everything becomes simpler and clearer when expressed in F#. Hopefully you'll see that with some of my code samples. This is a quote from Byron Cook. How many people have done academic computer science courses? Cool, most of you. Have you come across the halting problem? Would you consider it impossible? Yep. Okay. So Byron has a program used by Microsoft to test C programs which will tell whether your program will terminate or not. It's been used for all of the device drivers that you have on your Windows system since the program has started running. They've had virtually no device driver crashes. They actually found a device driver halting problem inside the sample C code that they were sending to the device driver manufacturers. With this, the project has a lovely name. It's Terminator, because it finds terminations. And there's a version 2, of course, Terminator 2. But obviously not all of us get to solve the halting problem, but this is a tool that can solve very, very complex problems. Now, I work in the enterprise these days. Actually, some of the complexity outside of null reference exceptions, on the complexity side, one of the things that I deal with a lot is huge dependency cycles in my projects. So I'm going to give you an example. Has anybody used behavior-driven development here? Okay, so this is the dependency graph for SpecFlow, one of the premier frameworks for C#. And it's actually quite hard to see anything because it's just so busy with cycles, right? I'm sorry, it's just that busy. I can't help. This slide's just ugly. This is a F# library which has exactly the same functionality. Well, actually it has more because this has a parser as well built in. This is the dependency graph. If you squint, you can probably actually read it. Well, you'll also notice that all the dependencies go from the left to the right. There are no circular dependencies. You can read this and you can maintain this code. So, on many, many levels, F# solves your complexity problems, a lot of the problems you have with C#. It also integrates beautifully with C#. Okay, we're all developers, right? So that's enough talking. I'm going to do some coding. What I'm actually going to do is quite weird, probably, for the first go. I'm going to try and write some C# code. The idea here is that I'm going to take that C# code, turn it into F#, and in theory, you'll be able to do the same when you want to do that when you get home. So, I'm going to do new project. Oh, sorry. That's the hardest bit for presenting, is getting from smoothly between PowerPoint and your desktop. Okay, so new project, C#. We'll do a class library, and we'll talk about money, I think. So has anybody read Kent Beck's test-driven development book? I've got quite a few hands there. That's great. Thanks. So in that book, one of the first examples is he tries to make a class for, he wants to make a report for multi-currency. So he starts off making a class for dollars, right? So I'm going to do the same thing in C#. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to probably, I want to have something that's going to be equivalent to my F# version, so we're going to be immutable by default. So I'm going to have a constructor for dollars. Now you might not do this in your standard C# flow. You might have mutable or auto properties. I don't know if it's going to make a huge amount of difference here. But typically when you're doing enterprise code, what you'll do is you'll have a constructor and you'll inject the dependencies. So you'll probably be doing quite a lot of this during the day if you're making new classes. So we'll store that away. And then we'll expose a property. Oops. Now, if you're working in the enterprise, you might have to have a nice comment on that, just in case, you know. Awesome. I won't do that again. It's a bit boring, isn't it? And then we'll have a toString, possibly, so we can have a pretty print of that. So I'll do string.format. And probably, if I'm doing a multi-currency report, I want some way of multiplying that. So I'll have some sort of function that returns some dollars. And we'll have, I call it times. Multiplier. Great. Oh, new dollars. Great. All quite good, yeah? So, can anybody see how many times I have used the keyword or the word amount? No, I'm actually going to have to extend the screen to see that. Count for me. Anybody want to take a guess at that? Okay, I'm going to have to count myself. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So I call this the local government pattern, because you fill in a form in local government, you have to fill in a form in triplicate and then fill it in again. So yeah, there we are. And I'll be nice, we can just get rid of some of that, probably. In fact, maybe we can get rid of that. So, oh, no, I can't get rid of that one. I've got a class for dollars with a multiply method and an amount, and we've hit 36 lines of code. And we're over a couple of pages. So what I wanted to do is show you how I would do the same thing in F#. Oops. So I don't want squiggly lines everywhere while I'm refactoring. I'm just going to create a text file, and I'll drop that in there. So, first thing you need to know about F# is there's not many curly braces. Okay, so those go. Now that's a bit like Python, and that's probably one of the most unsettling things of F#. But it does mean you take up less space, which might be useful if you like to see things without scrolling. Okay. Now, in the old days, curly braces meant speed, because C was fast. I think they were there to actually make it faster for the parser, not for the user. Right? So there we are. And if we look at it, the structure of our code, when we format it correctly, is enough to infer what's going on. So we can just bring that back there. In F#, using is open. Everybody seems to have their own way of doing that. In VB and I believe Java, in Java it's import. Okay. Next one, for awesomely useful XML comments, if it's a summary, you can just omit the summary bit. It just works that out for you. Okay. Everything's designed to be kind of intuitive. Now, if we look at this, remember we've got a lot of repetition in order to capture this amount variable, right? So, if I wrote a function or a method called $, I would have a parameter amount, right? Or like I have with multiplier, and I'd be able to use that through the rest of the function, right? So it's a closure. It closes over that variable. It's used everywhere else. That's how F# works with classes. So we can just get rid of this. Okay. So amount is a parameter, and that can be used throughout the rest of the class. So boilerplate gone. Let's just fix this up a bit. By default, everything in F# is public. You can put internal or private or whatever you want there. We use type. There's only a few keywords in F#. There's fun, let, and type are the main ones. Okay. For our members, we just say we have a member for $, with an amount, property, name, and that is amount. So that's that done. I'll put in a comment just to be cool, just to even it out. We use the equals to say this member equals something. Now, we can use new dollars here, right? But, you know, it's kind of obvious that it's new dollars. We don't have to. Now, the way F# works with this is actually quite cool. It helps you with bugs. If you have an iDisposable in F#, you have to use the new keyword. Otherwise, you don't. So if you look through your code, if you see new, you know that's an iDisposable. Immediately. And you've got to deal with it. Okay. Yes. Now, I had a few hands for people who did C++. You're going to love this if you did C++. So we can do all of the kind of things we would do in C# land. We can do string.format. But what we might want to do is sprintf. And that will be what we want to do. Okay, so does anybody find this slightly clearer than the previous example? There is no noise here, right? This is just defining what we wanted to do, right? So for classes, F# is pretty cool. We can do our multiple constructors, we can do inheritance, we can do all the things we can do in C#. So I'm just going to pick that up. So we've gone down from 33 lines to 11 lines. That's pretty good. I'll take that. The next thing we'd probably do is we create a script file. We don't need to create a project in F# before we can just start playing with it. So I'll create an F# script file. And I'll drop that in there. Okay, now we've got nice IntelliSense-y stuff. Oh, sorry, that was a C# syntax. Oh, and we've just got a line-up problem there. Oh, still got a line-up problem. The joys of using Notepad. And okay, cool. And it's like C# actually there. Sorry, so my Notepad's foo isn't that amazing, as you can see. Okay, but now we've got something that's in F# with colours. Now if I want to try this out, all I need to do, oh, these semicolons, right? When I'm writing C# code, I put 2 semicolons on the end of the line, just in case I want to put an extra statement in. No, I don't. If you want to put an extra statement on the end of the line, you put a semicolon, you put the next statement. And if you don't have to, right? Okay, I guess it's just horses for courses. Now, I highlight that bit of code, I press Alt-Enter. I'll just drag this window out to the right for you. So I've actually just I've got that in my REPL, and I can say oh, actually, before I do that, can anybody, I haven't got a type definition anywhere in here. Can anybody guess, who isn't part of the F# group here, what the type of amount is? Is it obj? Is it alpha? Something else? Anyone want to take a go? It depends? Well, shall we have a look? Okay, let's find out. Integer. It's probably not what I wanted. But the reason for that is the sprintf. So, in C# we have the var keyword, and that can infer what was on the right of the expression. In F#, type inference works across the entire program. Right? Which is really cool. So you think of it as type inference on steroids. And now, typically, we wouldn't do that, right? We would probably, for this kind of case, we put in colon decimal. So it's on the right, like TypeScript, and many other languages. Okay, cool. Now that's kind of interesting. So now if I was to put the wrong thing here, it tells me. So even our printing functions are type checked. This is less typing, more type checking, right? That's a nice deal. Okay. So I'll start again. Loads of money, dollars. And so I'm already playing with that. Okay, I didn't have to spin up a unit test. I'm just playing with it now. We'll take loads of money to 11. Oh, sorry, haven't implemented the operator yet. Getting ahead of myself. Oh, loads. Great. Sorry, there's it to 11 after a bit of lack of typing. Okay, so I can try out my code immediately. We can see the pretty print. That's kind of nice. I think what I'm going to do now is, from here, what we'd want to do is maybe write some tests, yeah? So let's have a go at that. So, once we've had a play with our code and we've made a few typos and we're pretty happy with it, then at that point, we might want to push it into an F# project. So I'll create an F# library. These are just the same as C# libraries. So I'll just do this, F# money. That's kind of interesting. Okay. I take the code that I've written in the script. Still very interesting. I'll drop that in there. Now I'm going to just change that namespace because we've already got a C# one, right? And I can build that. That's actually created the same IL code as the C# version, right? So there's actually no difference. All we've done is type a third of less of the lines. And I just want to quickly prove that to you before I go into the tests. So just as I'd have a C# reference, project reference, I just press add the reference. I've got F# money there. I'll just add a new class. Okay, void main or something. Now, oh look, there's a class. So NDC F# money, dollars, it's new. Now actually, with theory, I've got a collision with the other one. So it's immediately available to C#, and if I look at that, there's my amount. Now my XML comments come over. Literally, it's as if I wrote it in C#, but I've gone and had 5 cups of tea in between, kind of thing, right? As an Englishman, I like that. I like drinking tea. I like sitting at my desk less. So, that's cool. Now, that's how I generate exactly the same C# code. And with the same sort of extensibility style. Now, for our dollars class, really all we want is an amount, right? And actually we don't want a dollars class, we want money, right? We want an amount and a currency value. So I'll show you how I do it in F# idiomatically. So I'd have a type money, and here I'd use a record type, and I'd have an amount, which would be a decimal, and I'd have a currency, which I could just have a string for, so it could be US dollars or whatever. Okay, let's build that. That's one line of code. Now that actually does more than, in effect, my dollars one. If I add multiplier with member is times equals this with okay, so that's the equivalent of the code that we wrote in 33 lines of C#. Whoops. So I get the point here is that, you know, if you're wanting to do classes, this is kind of cool. And so actually var money equals new money dollars. Oh, thanks. are the things that happen when you do F sharp and C sharp together. Oh no. Seem to have some sort of... Oh man. Oh, it's lovely having pair programming here. Okay, that was why. That's really confusing, isn't it? So, oh, I'm going to just revert out of that. Right. We wrote one line of code to get that record type. Let's get back to the point. We wrote one line of code, we got our namespace, I got my namespace and class name mixed up, don't do that at home. Okay. I've got a constructor from C# for constructing it. Right? So we've gone from 33 lines down to, there's the amount, there's our times function, down to 2 lines. Right? Now, this is awesome because it means I can do, my standard sort of class-based setting up my domain, and I've been able to do this in the financial area. I've had 50 C++ classes that nobody's ever really got their head around, and I'll be able to get that on one page, on one screen. It fits in my head. Right? I can see it. Everybody suddenly understood what was going on where they hadn't before. Right? And if I want to change it, then I've got one page. I just go in and change it. Right? That's got to be nice. And when I'm changing it, I can play with it. So anyway, OO is pretty cool. Let's do testing. Now, obviously, what we've just done, we've been able to immediately just try out the things in the REPL. But what we can also do is do standard unit testing because we want to have our continuous build and whatnot. So I'll do money tests. And we'll add a reference to F# money. So same sort of deal. And hopefully the internet's going to... Oh no, I need to get internet. Excellent. So just like you would in C#, you would go to the NuGet of Doom. Let me just check I've got any internet at all. So this is where NuGet doesn't really work when you don't have any internet connection. Okay, look, we're good now. Which is most of the time for me because I spend a lot of time on the train. So I install NUnit. Cool. Now, I'll write a module for my tests. Now I'll start off with something like so. That's nice, right? So, in F# we can put white space in our method names, so when we're writing unit tests we can make them readable. Crazy. Right? I don't see this catching on. Open NUnit framework. And we can do all of these horrible things that we would normally do. So expected actual. Great. And then if I want to, you can use the built-in unit test runner, ncrunch. I'm using testdriven.net here, and that will run those tests. Now, while that's going through whatever it's doing, if you're wanting to get into F#, a really good place to start is writing unit tests, right? You can get those straight into your enterprise, and nobody's even going to know. Nobody looks at the tests, right? So, and actually you might be able to get stuff done because you can write them really quickly. So yeah, it's all win really. So that one passed. Now that's a little bit pedestrian. What we might do is use something a little bit more fluent because we're in a powerful language here. So I'll just head back into. I'm very brave. I'm going to head back into NuGet, and I'm going to look for something called FS-Unit. But what I want to show you here is that it's the same sort of NuGet or fast experience that you have in C#. You're not losing anything. Just winning really. Just writing less code, unless you're paid by the number of lines, in which case COBOL. So actually, I'll just do this one. So what did I say? I wanted to say 2 plus 2 should equal 4, right? Oh. Oh, bugger. Yeah, that's what I meant. So that's using FS-Unit, so we just write them in English, bang, done. Okay, cool, that's nice. So because we don't require dots, we can do dots and brackets. You've seen me do those, right? Dots and parens, but we don't need to. We can have functions. They can be upper or lower case, and you can pass a function to another function. We can write DSLs that look like English, right? And this extends over the whole, anything you're doing, your business domain or whatever. Okay, so we just run that. I'll show you one more in this area. So, now this should equal things a bit enterprise, right? So we'll skip that. This is another framework called Unquote. We can use it within NUnit environment. So really what we mean is 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? That's what we want. So with that, we'll just do test plus 2. This is a deliberate mistake, not like the other mistakes I've done. So 2 plus 2 equals 5. So I'll just run that for you. Now these funny symbols, it's a bit like if anybody uses ASP.NET or classic ASP or PHP or whatever, when you're doing a template, you put some markings to say lift this bit's code, right? And what we're saying here is that this bit is code that can be used by the test framework. And so what it's able to do here is say, you've said 2 plus 2 equals 5. If I reduce the left-hand side, it's 4 equals 5. So it'll actually show you the reduction steps that are going on. So you'll see all of the method calls that go into your assertion. And then you'll actually be able to reason about where it went wrong. That's in the side of test framework. So that's kind of taking it to a new level, right? And yeah, just one NuGet click away. And hopefully if you've got internet. So, anybody here do BDD? Yep, well, we got one. Okay, so that wasn't a resounding amount of excitement. So when you've got sort of business logic and customers and weird things like that, and you want to talk about what you're doing, what you might do is actually meet them and write some sort of specification what you're doing. And what we might want to do is actually automate that afterwards. So here's a text file in Visual Studio. And I've set a breakpoint in it. So this is using TICSpec. This is the one with the low dependency graph. This is 100K DLL, which does all of this, including the debugger support, which is nice. eventually. Oh, breakpoint in the text file, nice. So I'm actually executing my text file against the test. There is some magic going on, but I will show you that. Actually, I'll jump into this one. This is a more exciting example, which is Scrabble. So the magic here is I have this backing file. So where I'm looking at when player 1 plays there. So here I've actually got a regex in my method name. And so I've got one line of code which will wire up that text. So that's the magic bit. But actually, just with a few lines of code, I've dealt with mapping that English language over. And actually, I was able to implement the whole of Scrabble here. So this is how we do pattern matching. That hopefully you might even be able to read that. That's those letters at the top have a 1 score and so on. These are the properties. We have words, double letter scores, triple word scores, center star. And I can match over those properties, computing the words. Actually, if we head over to Scrabble steps, you can see we assert the total function there. So what you might consider quite complex problems can be solved very easily. Testing's very nice. Okay. How much time have I got? Any questions on that? That's another good place to get F# into your team. I think I might just show you another little thing around this. So I broke my arm a couple of years ago, and I was lying in bed, being able to type with one hand, and I was like, I've never written a spreadsheet before. I wonder what it'd be like to write Excel. So I had about a week before I had to go back to work. So it worked out all right, actually. So I've got this Excel clone. You can import and export files from Excel, and you get all of the color formatting that you get with Excel. It does do a few extra things as well. I'll just quickly show you that, and then I'll show you the test as well. The machine seems to be a little bit slow. So here we go. So you've got the ability to import the sort of color formatting, and there's your pieces here. Okay. Now, I might want to write something like 10 plus 10, I get 20. Now, what I really want to write is I want units, because I don't want to make mistakes, right? Oh, good. So this one actually supports units of measure as well. That took me about an hour to add in. I'll show you that code quickly. And we can do D10 divided by 5 seconds, and then we've got a speed. All right, so that's kind of nice. Now the test for that, I was able to write in the same style I just showed you. So here are my summation tests. We're saying for a single cell, if I have A1 as 1, when the formula is A1, it should be 1. When I sum A1, it's 1, and so on. So that's a very simple test. And that extends out. Okay. So this testing style does actually extend out quite well. Also, we looked at classes before. We can define unit types. So that was the units of measure here as 3 lines of code. Units are unitless. They have a single unit or composite units. So again, something that you might have had free C# files for is a lot less. This is the entire domain for Excel. This is the running code you're seeing. You can have values, references, operators, and functions. And here are functions. And here we've got one line per function. Okay, so simplicity solving complexity. Right. So speaking of complexity, how many people here deal with JSON? Let's have a JSON sample. So, how many people spend a lot of time on JSON? Right? Okay. So let's say I had my money class, or I've got some sort of reference data from on the web of JSON. Now here I've just marked it up so you can see it, but I can just give a HTTP address for that. I'll just change this. So we define a block of JSON, our example, and excellent. So there's age and there's name. So age is an int and name is a string. So it'll actually let you navigate JSON documents just by passing an example of them. So you just see name and age there. So I've just added in a new property. Oh, there it is. Okay, so height's decimal because we've got the decimal place there. Right, so that's kind of cool. This is a feature called type providers. So you don't need to manually type in all of that JSON stuff anymore. You can just do it in F# instantly. Okay, now what I'm doing there, you know, you don't want to put your JSON in there. Let's say I've got weather API or some like third-party API I want to get to. I'm now just hitting the internet and having a look through that particular API, that weather API. One line of code. All right. Cool. Let's take it a little bit further. Here I'm going to connect to Freebase, which is collated sort of graph database with data from Wikipedia and so forth. So terabytes of data. You couldn't code gen the data for this. This is, as I click the button, it's actually going off to Freebase and getting the information. So if we go into society, I'm interested in celebrities and abused substances and cocaine, and yeah, I'm there. You know, the world of celebrities is at my fingertips, right? But the world is at your fingertips. So let's take another example. This might be something you might actually use. The World Bank. So this gives you the world at your fingertips, right? So I do w.countries dot, we're in Norway, dot. I wonder what I can find out about Norway. Quite a lot actually. So these are the things available to me about Norway. So literally I can find out anything with a couple of pressing dot a few times. One line of code, start pressing dot. Okay, cool. Right. I'm just going to what I want to do is do some quick charts for you. So I'm just going to copy in this small fragment of code. Oh, I always do that. So let's say there's always been something between England and France. I'm interested in comparing the two. I will get GB GDP against France GDP, and I want to plot a chart. I don't need to compile anything. Now at this point I went off to the internet, to the World Bank, picked up the data and dropped it on a chart. So I can literally get my data like that and then plot it out to a chart. Let's do something a bit more interesting. Okay. So, there we are out. We've got one little more demo for you. Anybody here follow football? Okay, not many, sorry about that. So, let's say we go to the BBC website and we have a look at the Premier League table in England. Okay, that's a table. What I can do, I've actually connected now to the BBC website, and there's the Barclays Premier League information. All right. And what I'll do is just get the first row, show that to you. Oh, for some reason it's interesting showing me Windows Form stuff, that's nice. Great, okay. So here is, yeah, so we got there in the end. Yes, it has to go over the internet. So it's got information about the Premier League, and we can show you the football teams in the Premier League. You can see the values there. So I'm able to hook up to any HTML page as well as JSON, XML, and so forth. One last little one. Anybody here use the R programming language and isn't a pirate? Okay, this is big in data science. So, R. So we can actually, from our F# interactive window, ask the R programming language to do a plot for us. We can also ask Java, Python, MATLAB, and a whole host of other languages. So you're not trapped in the F# or C# infrastructure when you're using F#. Okay, that's a little taste. I think I'm coming close to the end, so I'm just going to run out my slides now. Transitioning between PowerPoint into PowerPoint is painful. So that was the R-Type provider. All right. If you were around in the 90s, you might understand that one. We looked at the World Bank. Now, just before I wrap up, if you're interested in learning more about F#, hopefully you are, I'd recommend going to fsharp.org. That was nice and easy, right? We're not trying to make it too hard for you. Everything you need to know is there. If you want to learn F#, hope you've seen a bit now. You know how to take a class and turn it into one line of code. But if you want to get your head around the syntax, there's something called the F# coins. It's a set of failing unit tests. Every time you make a test pass, you learn a new element of the language. It takes about 2 hours. My kids have done it. And at the end of it, you've pretty much got your head around the syntactical bits. Okay. There's a website called Try F Sharp, which lets you try F Sharp in the browser. So you don't even need to install Visual Studio or Xamarin. Buy my book. It's the one in the middle. Otherwise, actually, if you're looking to get into F Sharp, I think the one in the top left is the most recent and very popular. If you want to learn how to write your own programming language, this is being taught in universities, I know in Copenhagen, around Denmark. For undergraduates, this will teach you how to write your own compiler. All the examples are in F Sharp. And I think I'm just exactly on time for you to say questions. Yep.
Is there any way to have F Sharp and C Sharp in the same project?
So the question is there any way to have F Sharp and C Sharp actually in the same project? Not really. So you can have, obviously, the projects side by side. What you can do, and what I do a lot of, is I have an F Sharp script file inside my C Sharp project, and if I want to test out my C Sharp code, I can just invoke it from the F Sharp script. And I can just play with it like I was playing with F Sharp code. I just reference the assembly, which I've got in the C Sharp project. Cool. Yep, another question?
Yeah, I was kind of curious when you said you had new on our disposable things. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, great. So I haven't got a lot of time. But when you hover over a class in F Sharp, it will tell you if it's iDisposable or not. So that's already a win. If you don't put new and your type is iDisposable, it will give you a warning saying you haven't used new. So literally, when you're looking through C Sharp code, you have no idea whether it's iDisposable. And often you might end up in Reflector or the documentation trying to find that little piece of information out, which leads to issues. So that's one thing. There's another kind of cute thing in F Sharp, which is, so in C Sharp you'll have to use the using keyword, and you have this scope. So you have to sort of have these kind of large scopes. In F Sharp there's actually a keyword for that called use, and when it goes out of scope it just deals with it for you. So instead of saying var, you say use. So iDisposable is a lot more convenient. It's actually a bit more like being in C++ land for dealing with those nasty things that cause all sorts of horrible bugs. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah, one at the back.
If you use reflection and you have like attributes on classes and methods, will that behave the same thing?
Yep, so the question is, if you have attributes on methods and stuff, like you would in C Sharp, would it have the same behavior as C Sharp? Absolutely, exactly the same. No difference whatsoever, and we were doing that for the unit testing. And actually what's kind of cute there is, although you can't put white space into C Sharp methods, right, all of the .NET unit testing frameworks support the F Sharp model of allowing that. So yeah, it just works. And it comes out in your continuous build as actually readable. Crazy. Any other questions? The light's really harsh on me. Okay, if not, then thank you very much. Cheers.